welcome to today's session of the Leanplum Roundtable Series, Customer Engagement Done Right. So we've already had 4 sessions. You might have been at one of our previous sessions already. If not, the Customer Engagement Done series has had various topics already. We've gone from A/B testing to gaming hacks to lifestyle apps. And today we're going to go and talk about from zero to hero mobile CRM growth. And yeah, I'm super proud to share that today we're here with Replug, a mobile growth agency out of Berlin. And also we have here today MyPostcard and Bending Spoons, also out of Berlin and out of Italy. Let me just go, yes. So yeah, next I'd like to introduce myself. Many of you might know me already, as you might have been at our previous sessions. I'm Lisa. I work at Leanplum for around about a year. I'm German myself, and I've been working in sales previously. So I've been running the German mobile growth strategy. So you might have seen me around in Berlin, but well, nowadays you see me via fun webinars. So yeah, and today I have some really awesome speakers here with me. First, I'd like to go and introduce Lorenzo, Italian himself, co-founder of Replug. Lorenzo, can you give a quick introduction about yourself?
Of course, I was muted as usual. So, hello everyone, thanks Lisa for the introduction. I'm Lorenzo and I am Italian, you were right. I live in Berlin, but I've been working in Berlin for the past 7 years in the mobile industry. I work for some companies like Zalando, Labu, Free to Move, the last one. But since January 2020, I've started this adventure that is called Replug. Together with my co-founder Luca, we launched Replug as a mobile marketing agency. I will say something more later on.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Lorenzo. Great to have you here today. And next, next we have Sebastian Michel. Sorry, that was half German, half English. He's here from MyPostcard, a client of ours. And yeah, Sebastian, could you give a quick introduction?
Exactly. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, I'm Sebastian Michel. I'm the head of growth at MyPostcard, and MyPostcard, simply explained, basically allows you to take the photos that you have on your phone, send them as real printed postcards, greeting cards, and more to the people you care about, family, friends, all of them, which especially at the times right now is a pretty neat thing to do. And yeah, you're going to be hearing some more from me later.
Cool. Thanks, Sebastian. And then we also have Jacopo here today from Bending Spoons out of Italy.
Yeah, hi everybody. So I'm also Italian like Lorenzo. So we have a parity of list of nationalities. And I work at Bending Spoons, which is one of the biggest hub developers in Europe. And we do both video editing and fitness and wellness apps. And I'll talk a bit more about it later. And right now I manage marketing for some of our top fitness apps.
Yes, great. Thanks, Jacopo. I'm just noticing we're actually just a German-Italian round here today. Yeah, fun. Okay, so about the housekeeping, everybody, you can see at the bottom of your screen, you can see various buttons. There is a Q&A box with which you can ask questions for the end. So if you have any questions that are maybe coming up during the presentation, which you might forget during the presentation, please just already throw them into the Q&A section whenever their questions are coming up. I will make sure that they will be answered by our fantastic speakers at the end of the session. Also, there will be a recording. I will share this one after the session with you. And in case there's any technical difficulties that you have, just send me a message in the chat function. Also, we will have polls coming up during the presentation, during the slides. So you'll see like a pop-up coming onto your screen. The higher the engagement, the more fun of course, for us to actually go and engage with you and adjust our comments or content to your needs. So yeah, nice. If there's any questions, throw them into the chat function. I'll make sure to take care of them. And in the meantime, we'll go and get this thing kicked off. Yeah, so as again, welcome everybody. For the people that maybe just joined the session, welcome to the next session of Customer Engagement Done Right, from Zero to Hero, Mobile CRM Growth. And on the agenda today, we're first going to hear from Lorenzo about everything moving from acquisition to retention. Then we're going to hear from Jacopo from Bending Spoons, how they were actually able to choose the CRM that fits their needs. And then Sebastian is going to go and explain to us how we're actually going to go get started with our CRM strategy, what we have to think about when it comes to onboarding, retention, and optimization. So a session filled with lots of cool things here today. I'm just starting off right away with a poll here for you guys so that we're going to go and get everybody engaged. Let me just quickly launch that one. All right, you should see it in your screen now. Onto your buttons, go and click. Question is, what has been your company's main focus so far? I'm just trying to understand, are people here today mainly focusing on acquisition? Is your company already moving to retention and CRM? Have you been focusing on both or neither? Just so that we can really know with whom are we here today, what kind of level of knowledge is there already, and yeah, to adjust our content a little bit to your needs. All right. Nice. Okay, cool. Thanks for participating. I'm sharing the results here. So yeah, I guess the majority, as we already thought a little bit, has so far been mainly focusing on acquisition. So you're in the right session. Let me tell you, this is the right address for you to be at right now. This is good, because we're going to tell you all about it. We're going to tell you all about what the next steps are from moving away from acquisition towards retention. Nice. So thanks for participating here. I'm going to go and have Lorenzo take over. And yeah, you're going to hear everything about Lorenzo's presentation in a little bit.
Now I should be unmuted. Can you hear me, guys? Yes. Okay, thanks again, Lisa, for the introduction for the second time. And I'm going to start quickly, no introduction because I already talked about myself at the beginning. And now I will tell you a bit more about Replug. Replug is this mobile marketing agency that helps mobile companies grow in different areas. The first one is mobile user acquisition and retention, and then we support these companies in choosing the right tracking and analytics setup, and then we provide them with performance creatives, let's say the best creatives to scale performance marketing for mobile applications. It's enough, really. I don't want to self-promote too much, and we can start already with the first question. Why are we here today? We are basically here today because we want to see how to grow an application from zero till the point of starting with the CRM activities. As the title of the webinar says, from zero to hero. I can remember when I started in this industry several years ago, that the only thing that mattered was at the time was installs and CPI. It was scale. It was easy to scale because if you had a good CPI, we could just spend money, and that was it. Soon enough, though, we realized that this was not the right way to scale. This was not efficient. And developers and advertisers realized that the CRM and the engagement part were actually very important, as much important, if not more important than acquisition. Why? Let's see some number quickly. Let me remove this. Unfortunately, we see that a lot of installs, almost 80%, have only one session, and that after 3 months, just 3 months, almost, let's say, just 1.7% of the user is only active. What does it mean? It means that we are losing a lot of users on the way of user acquisition. It means that we spend a lot of money to acquire users that disappear, users that don't use the application. So this is actually very, very, very important to understand how can CRM help the growth of an application, because fortunately with CRM, we can reduce the number of one-time visitors, we can reduce the number of ghost users, the users that disappear, and we can increase the engagement and retention rate. So at the end of the day, we can increase the number of conversion and maximizing maximizing the LTV of the user. So that's why, let's say, CRM is getting so much attention during the past years, during the past months. Now, there should be another poll, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, one moment. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties here. One moment. There, yes. All right. So the question is, when do you start thinking about CRM? From day -1, when you start to spend money on UA, or when you start scaling UA? All right. Okay, cool. Thanks for your engagement, everybody.
So the answer is from day -1, and I am super happy to read this answer because actually is the same answer that we believe at Replug being true. At Replug, we believe that we should really start thinking about CRM from day -1. And what does it mean? It means before to start any kind of implementation or any kind of promotion. And be careful, because thinking about CRM doesn't mean doing CRM and running actual campaigns. So the reason why we focus on this very important question, this very important fact, is that not so many app developers, unfortunately, think about CRM from the beginning. What we can see with the partners we are working with is that many advertisers see CRM just as a box to tick when they realize that they're losing most of the installs they acquire. And usually, in my experience, that moment, it's a bit too late. That's why we strongly recommend to all our partners we work with to consider CRM, even if they are not planning to start soon. Even, I mean, at the beginning, the first thing you think is not sending a push notification, is to get the user and see how they behave. Still, it's good to see, it's good to think about the day that you will have to start doing CRM, because trust me, sooner or later, if you have an application, you will need to do that. At the end of the day, I mean, what we believe is that engagement is an essential part of the growth, right? And so at Replug, we see the growth as a combination of activities that need to work all together at the same time in order to function efficiently. Also, for this reason, we recently developed this model where we compare the app growth lifecycle to a rocket. So in this growth rocket model, as you can see, you can find all the macro activities of the app growth strategy. And we believe that all these elements need to work, let's say, together, because they are equally important. There is no, let's say, user acquisition without infrastructure. There is no user acquisition without engagement. And all these parts, if they work together, they give balance and they give efficiency to scaling the mobile app acquisition. Of course, we know obviously that there are many growth models around. What we did here was just to create a simplified one that is accessible for every company and every developer who want to grow efficiently, but without forgetting any of the important macro areas. And all these elements that you see in this model then are distributed in the 4 main stages of the app growth lifecycle, which are set up, learn, scale, and engage. Those are the stages that we see crucial in order to move from 0 to hero. As you can see from this slide, the engagement part is the last one in the cycle, in the life cycle, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't start thinking about CRM even while we are completing the previous steps. So what we are going to do now is to see stage by stage, phase by phase, which are the main activities and how we can connect them to the CRM that we will start at the end. So the first phase, the setup phase, is the crucial part where we decide if we want to start with the right foot or with the wrong foot. Why? We never stress enough the importance of doing this thing in the right way, because all the things that you do in the setup phase then will be useful for the next phases. For example, we do attribution to identify the traffic sources of your user acquisition campaigns. We do tracking to track and send the right events, both to the MMP, but also to the CRM tool. We want to have good product analytics to analyze all the funnel steps and to see where the user drops. We want to have good deep linkings to engage effectively when we start, for example, with CRM or with retargeting campaigns. And then we want to implement all the other SDKs like analytics, social login, etc. What can we do here to start, let's say, thinking about CRM? In this phase, we can already think about the in-app events to pass to the CRM tools, to those in-app events that we want to engage the user with. But also we can start thinking about how to ask for opt-in to push notification and emails. Of course, when you are in the setup phase, as I said before, you don't think about sending a push notification, but it's good that when you acquire the first users, you already ask for the permission to send them messages, because one day you will have to send an email, you will have to send a push notification, and if you don't have the permission already, you have to ask it for again, and it's never working very well. Once it's done with the first phase, we can pass to the second phase. The second phase is the learn phase, where we acquire the first users and we start learning. Also, this phase is very, very important, of course. In this phase, how do we acquire the first users? In an organic way. And for organic, I mean sending the application to all your friends that usually don't use it. They just use it to make you a favor, but still they give you some insights. You can post your application on some blogs that talk about your product, but you can especially do App Store optimization activities. With the App Store optimization activities, you can get like free users that are never free, but still they are organic, because you get discoverable by the people who are interested in your product. So those are the first steps. Have a good ASO strategy and get discovered. Of course, it's not enough to create a good user base in most of the cases. That's why one of the best practice to build your first user base is to go on Facebook or in some other paid UA channel and have some low spend UA activity. Usually I suggest Facebook because it's very easy to set up and because it's it has a great targeting and you can really find the users that you want for your product. So those are the main things to do to build your user base, and then you can start analyzing. You can start analyzing the costs, you can start analyzing the engagement, you can start analyzing the conversion rates, and in this way you can start creating benchmarks and adjust your KPIs, because of course at the beginning you had some KPIs in mind, but until you don't have users, until you don't have some spend, you don't have real benchmarks. In this way, you can also understand where the user dropped, and this is important in an optic of CRM. What can we do in this phase to start thinking about CRM? We can start having the concept of the campaigns. We can start see where the user drop and already think about, okay, I want to send this notification or this email in this specific moment. Even if you have few users, you can really start thinking about that. At the same time, another thing we can do here is to start planning the implementation of the tool. And for start planning implementation, I mean, start looking around for some vendors, start talking to vendors, start understanding the prices, start understanding what do they offer and what do you need. In this way, when it will be time, you will have an idea and it will be easier to choose. Next phase, let's recap. We got the setup done right, we got a small user base, and now we need to grow. We want to scale. Of course, we want to do that consciously and efficiently. I mean, it's impossible to talk about scaling in one slide. That's why I decided to focus on 3 main points. So at Replug, we suggest our clients, when they have budget to spend, when they want to grow the user base, we suggest them to go omni-channel. What does it mean? It's to test all the possible opportunities that there are in the market to acquire users. Because if you have a big budget, I think it's a bit silly to invest all the budget in one channel or in 2 channels, like Google and Facebook, the duopoly. So what is good to do, in our opinion, in my opinion, is to go and test everything you can. Like there are many opportunities on paid social. Besides Facebook, there is Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, but then there is also App Store, ASA, App Store, Apple Search Ads. There are the influencer campaigns, content marketing, programmatic, offline campaigns. So there are really many opportunities that unfortunately today we don't have time to talk about. This will give you a control over the budget because you can put the budget in the channels that are working the best. It will give you opportunity to test different things and different messages, and also will give a space for creativity. The second point of the scaling phase is to professionalize the analytics process. So if you spend a lot of money, you want to have good data, real-time data and reliable data, because we want to take real-time decision. We want to take decision based on data. So if at the beginning you could do the analysis on your own, now probably you need to have a BI team that gives you dashboards on Tableau, on Google Data Studio, and that you can monitor your performances. Third point and last point is grow the team. If you have the opportunity here, if you have the budget to hire people, and if you're spending a lot of money, it's good to have channel specialized people. Like if you spend most of the budget on Facebook, you want to have a person that is very good on Facebook campaigns. If you spend a lot of budget on search, you want to have someone who can really make the difference on search channels. So this will give you more efficiency, more learnings, and more ability to scale. Those were like the main points for the scaling phase. Of course, at this stage, you also start seeing the first problems in terms of retention rate and conversion rates that are going down. Why it's happening that? Because of course, when you spend money, a lot of money to acquire users, it happens that you acquire users less interested in your product, but also users that are interested but don't get the product. So how can we solve this problem? We can, first of all, refine the targeting of the campaigns. Of course, we can have better targeting and target better users, but that's usually not enough. So that's why we need to move to the next phase, and that's the phase of engaging the users, meaning turning the app installs in loyal and paying users. Also in this case, talking about the engagement part in one slide is very difficult, but I guess Jacopo and Sebastian will talk about it later. So I decided to focus again on 4 main points, and those are the points, the objectives and the purposes of CRM, in my opinion. So with CRM, you can, of course, activate and convert the users. You can send a push notification or the email to the user to do the right action, like if it's a purchase, if it's a registration, maybe it's play level. So you can really stimulate the user to do the action that you want. The second point is the service communication. And with service communication, I mean, those kind of communication, they are more useful for the users, for the people who use the app. I'll make an example with a mobility app we are working right now. We are working also on a plan to communicate, not every day, but often the strikes and when there is a traffic jam, so that the users see this message that say, hey, today there is a strike, take the cab rather than the bus, or just start your route 1 hour in advance because there is a traffic jam. These kind of things that can help create a one-on-one communication with the user, and it's really good for retention. At the same time, with a good CRM tool, and since we're here, I'm saying Leanplum, it is one of those, you can have great product A/B testing. And for product A/B testing, I mean personalizing the onboarding for different users. For example, if you have different channels, you can create a different onboarding according to the promotion or to the message that was in the campaign, but also testing different features. You can test different features for registration, for purchase, and this is really helping in getting better conversion. So testing. Last but not least, with CRM and with the engagement process, you can reactivate old users. You can bring back users for which you already paid. Of course, they might have disinstalled the app, but if you have the email, you can send an email if you have a good offer, and you can try to bring them back. At the end, the objective of the CRM is to create a personalized messaging experience to give to the users, and you can do that by segmenting the audience as much as you can, and also automatizing the campaigns. That's, let's say, the quick overview about the engaging phase. Now, I've been rushing a bit, so I will give you an overview just to wrap it up of when is the right time to do specific action. Let's start. I mean, it's pretty clear at the moment that we need to start, or it's good to start thinking about CRM from day -1 before to start with any implementation or with any promotion. When should we start with planning the implementation? Usually it's good in the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of the setup phase to start thinking already at the implementation of the CRM tool, because this CRM tool will have to communicate with all the other tools. We'll have to communicate with the MMP, we'll have to communicate with the product analytics tool, and so it's good to consider it already at the beginning. Also, in the setup phase, it's good to ask for opt-in, or at least think about how to ask for the opt-in of the user to receive communication. In the learn phase, or at the end of the learn phase, we can start implementing the actual tool. So this is something that really depends on how fast you plan to grow and on how many users and data you are getting during the learning phase. Usually, there is not a right answer, but we need to see between learning and scaling phase, we can start implementing the tool. When then we start scaling and we start spending budget, it's time to start the campaigns. Also in this case, the perfect timing depends on how grow you scale, how much money you spend. Usually, most of the CRM tools suggest to start when you reach 150 to 200K MAUs. So let's say when you have a good user base that allow to do segmentation, it's time to start with the campaigns. At the end, in the last part, that is not important because it's the last, it's the engage part, we can aim to automatize and test. We want to have an automatized environment that allows to, let's say, send the right communication, but also test different messaging and different features of the application. And that was it. I hope I was in time, Lisa.
All good, Lorenzo, you're good. All right, so Jacopo, it's your turn.
Perfect. Let me just go on and share my screen. Great, you should all be seeing that. So just a little bit of background, as Lisa already introduced me, I just wanted to talk for a very short time what's Spoons, and we're an app developer and a publisher, and we have some big apps like 30 Day Fitness and Sleep, Yoga Wave and Splice, and I handle marketing for our fitness and wellness portfolio, which comprises these three main apps. Oh, sorry, there should be a poll now.
Yes, there we go. So as a foundation for Jacopo's presentation, it would be great to know, how are you currently automating your CRM? Do you have any automation at all already? Do you have no automation at all? Or do you maybe have something like Leanplum, or maybe a solution that you built in-house? It would be great to let us know so that we can understand how advanced of an audience we have here, if it's rather how experienced you are with automation. All right, there we go. Let's share the results. Here we go. Okay.
Oh, okay. Good. Looks like lots of users are advanced users that already have some system in place. I still hope my talk will be interesting in this case. So this is a talk about first how we got to choose an external CRM tool and what kind of process that we went through, because I think that's something that lots of companies go through, especially when they start to scale. and they think about their users, and they need something that is not just in-house. And in general, I think that there's sometimes a focus that has to be shared between acquisition and retention or engagement of users. And it's usually easy to conceptualize and visualize the acquisition funnel. It's a bit more different to conceptualize and measure a retention funnel, which is very different depending from app to app and depending on the touch points that you want to engage the user with. The word philosophy, it's usually that if you can measure it, you probably shouldn't do it. Every action and every new initiative that you should take should be measurable. It doesn't really matter how brilliant you think the idea is or how promising all of your team thinks it will be, especially when it comes to re-engagement, which can have multiple KPIs. It's very important to understand which KPIs should be your goal, which KPIs are gonna say, okay, this activity has been a success or not. And the activities that you should come up with or that you plan should be measurable. And with this in mind, we actually started with trying email CRM, but we soon realized that the experiment that we were doing had lots of limitations. We started with a simple platform, but we saw that it was very limited in terms of scalability and in terms especially of measurement and A/B testing. What we wanted to do is that we wanted to see if our efforts, if our email campaigns were having an effect, where they were having these effects, and what kind of effect it was. If the effects was positive, if it was negative, what kind of users were being affected by our campaigns. And we saw that with this simple platform, we weren't in the best condition to do it. The top three needs that we had were first, measurability, two, proper A/B testing, and three, scalability. As I said, we needed to measure exactly what was happening to each users and what each email was doing to our users. And we had to do it through A/B testing. So of course, not just A/B testing between, let's say, different emails, but also A/B testing between different groups of users. One where we, let's say, which we target with our CRM activities, and which we do not, to see what the effects are. And three, the scalability. Since we have millions of users, we really needed a tool or a platform that could manage all of these users and all of these tests. Since we also have a very complex environment, since we run tests all the time, this was particularly crucial. So if you find yourself looking for a new tool or looking for building an internal tool, the top concerns that you should have or that you should look for are robust A/B testing capabilities. It makes no sense to have a testing tool or to do an activity or a new initiative if you can't really test it, if you can't measure it and see what effect it's having or what you think that effect is having. Then multiple channel re-engagement or multiple channel capabilities in order to see how different channels or engagement with these different channels, for instance, emails or push notifications or in-app messages are having on your users and how they're interacting with each other, especially if you want to scale and if you have a very complex app with different touch points, you want to engage different types of users with different channels. And three, deep customization and scalability. I said the scalability is very important, especially if you want to grow, and hopefully you will. And you also need to customize for different types of users, especially if they use different sections of your app or if they use your app in different ways. So let's say that the final takeaway is that if you can measure it, then you shouldn't do it. Especially when it comes to re-engagement, where it's harder to measure, you should look for a tool or build a tool that really lets you measure what you're doing, lets you do A/B testing, and gives you data to measure your ideas. Since with data, you can quickly figure out what effect the campaign or your activity is having on your users, and you can decide to stop it immediately before it does any damage, or to double down on it to scale very quickly. Because of course, without data, all we have are our opinions. Even if we think that an idea is great and rationally it's great, could still contain a bias in the way that you're engaging with your users. So a tool with A/B testing and measurement capabilities allows you to actually have a clear view of what's happening to your users. And that's it.
Amazing.
I think I can pass. Yeah.
Thanks, Jacopo. Thanks. Thanks for those insights. Yeah, so next up is Sebastian.
Yes. Hi, everyone again. So I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes.
I'm not going to get into, like, we also already did the introduction, so I'm going to jump basically straight into the points that I have to give you today. It's basically about how to get started with onboarding, retention, and optimization. So basically, how to get started with growth. That's the agenda that's going to come up from my presentation. It's basically, we start off with what is growth really all about. It's going to be really, really simplified. Then I'm going to go into how do you actually get started? And I mean, we can all agree that there's no like magic pill. There's no one size fits all. So it's really going to be about which practices can you really implement in your business to actually get going. And then 3 is really more of an outlook. Like if you manage your first steps, how can you actually like make your first leaps, and what's the next step that actually come after that? So let's get started. So what is growth actually all about? And I think it's pretty much explained by this. Yeah, so in the end, we're basically just trying to be pirates. And that's based on the Pirate Growth Framework, which is made up of A, R, R, and R. And it was first published by Dave McClure, so it's not my work. In the end, we're talking about acquisition, which I know that Lorenzo already basically talked about, which is just attracting new users, and you're all familiar with that already. Then we do have the activation, just turning those new users into customers. The retention, which basically just is to keep those customers that you activated coming back and keep them around. You do have the referral, so your own organic channel to actually entice customers to invite others to join. And then of course, since it's business, we're always talking about revenue. So how do you actually introduce customers to more of your products and other products that you might have? So that's just like a very easy way to like how we actually get started and what we're actually talking about today. So the TLDR would be, and I know that Lorenzo already covered part of this, in the end, once you actually have the right users, you're trying to connect with them at the right time with the right message and the right channel to ultimately engage them and then grow the business long term. So how do you actually get started? And I think in the end, like I'm going to be talking about 2 different parts here. One is going to be about engagement. The other one is going to be about optimization. And first, we're actually going to go into engagement. So to actually come up with a plan of action that fits what you're doing, to fit your company and your industry, again, there's no one size fits all. So you need to know where you want to end up before you actually start going. And that's actually where a poll comes into place. So my question to you is, how would you actually define success when it comes to growth in CRM, especially when it's about your company?
All right. There's the poll. You heard the question. The options are revenue, daily, weekly active users, or retention rate and conversion rate, feedback net promoter score, or something else. So let's hear it.
And I hope it's multiple choice. I hope
it is.
I hope it works.
Yes, it's
okay, perfect.
Multiple choice, I think.
So feel free to go wild. All right, 10 more seconds.
Okay. There we go. All right.
Okay, thanks everyone for the answers already. Perfect, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so that actually completely makes sense. Let me see. So we got retention rate number 1, number 2 is conversion rate, daily, weekly active users, then revenue, feedback, and something else. All right. That actually fits in neatly with what I was going to talk about. So that's perfect. So in general, and I think that pretty much comes down to which company you're working for, what kind of field you're in. In the end, you're always looking at different KPIs. And I think it's especially important to know which KPIs to look out for, both on the positive and negative side, to actually understand if you're doing a good job and if you actually end up where you wanted to go in the first place. So I think activation is one of the first things you should look for. So what's the sign-up rate, for example? Then you move to the next point, which is engagement. That's where daily, weekly, or even monthly active users come into play, depending on if there's seasonality. For example, within our app, we're fairly seasonal. So for us, it's really more about monthly actives instead of daily active, but that pretty much depends on what you're doing. So retention then, whether it's retention rate that you have, whether it's after a quarter, whether it's after a month, just really paying attention to what works and what doesn't. You got information coming in, of course, so whether that's account information or different information that just people need to know. Then you do have the important reactivation. So you get people coming back before you actually have to sunset them, before you basically they become ghost users. You have different ways and measures to keep them coming back. And in the end, yeah, again, it's business, so revenue is important, whether that's on a campaign level or on a feature level. You need to understand what kind of effects you actually have and what kind of effects you're actually looking for. So let's actually jump into engagement. And when I'm talking about engagement, again, keeping it kind of generic here to actually include everyone, I'm going to be talking about like 4 major categories here. And one is, I think, only a slight part of CRM, which is the informative, which is really more like account information, general information, where part of it might be used for CRM. So there might be a little teaser, a little PS in the end to actually get people interested in something else. But in the end, it's really all about the information that people need to have. The next one is occasional, which, for example, in our case is fairly important. So there's Christmas, Mother's Day, Easter, or any other holiday in different markets that you might be in. And that's a good way to actually get in touch with people. And then we come to stuff that's, from my point of view, really more and more important when it's really about automation. So there's triggered campaigns, which might be your purchase abandonment, which might be ratings, surveys, and things like that, that A, keep user coming back, or B, actually help improve your conversion rate and things like that. And of course, then there's journeys. Journeys I describe as basically triggered automated campaigns that are way, way longer and way more thought through, where it's really, for example, your typical onboarding, upselling, and cross-selling channels, where you basically have multiple campaigns all under one roof, where you're basically trying to get from point A to B, but there's so many different ways to go that you just want to include a lot of people and actually build strong journeys and strong automated channels that just work for you in the long term. And when we're talking about all of these, of course, there's different channels we can talk about here. So us, for example, we're working with these 3 major ones. I know that there's other ones, for example, like SMS, which for us doesn't really work out. So I'm going to be focusing on these 3. I mean, email, everybody knows of them. So generally we use it for detailed information. And the plus side is it does have the highest reach of them all, because if people sign up and then basically sign up for the newsletter, we do have their email addresses, and it's just a really, really easy and good way to stay in touch. Then of course we got the push notification, which for us normally means we're trying to really focus the messaging and send out teasers, which get straight to the point. And the positive side for that is you got really, really high interactivity. So if you're in the mobile industry, it's right on your phone. You just tap on it. Hopefully you got deep linking already in your app, meaning you go to the right place in the app and you can just interact with the offer, for example, right there. And last but certainly not least is in-app notification. We use these not only for contextual information, but also for reminders, explainers, and especially our journeys. That means that, for example, the onboarding, like show people how to use the app, where to find what they were looking for, especially if you've got different ads coming up with different focuses. You can actually go in and based on what people clicked on, give them certain types of onboardings of explainers and things like that. So I think that's really, really important to understand. Like, one, you need to figure out what's the different kind of messages that we can actually send out. And then also, what's the best way to convey that message? It doesn't have to be just one of these channels, but it probably normally is actually a combination of those. But you need to understand what's the positive and negative sides of each. So if you really want to send out like really, really detailed content, you probably don't have enough space in a push notification, but it might make sense to send a push to let people know that there's more information about a topic. They click on it and then they get the in-app notification where there's all the information they need, for example. In the end, especially if you're new to this and you don't know how to start, and you certainly don't want to make any mistakes, which we've all been there. I have to say that best practices for me, I think it's kind of, best practices in the beginning is definitely a way to start if you don't know where to start. So you get the ideas and you kind of like can get going with it. The problem with best practices though is that it's not tailored to what you're trying to do. Normally it's just really, it's very, very generic, and it's really hard to like get the insights that you might need. But in the beginning, if you get started with it and if you adapt along the way and really tailor it to your needs and to your business, I think you're going to be good. So the other part is, of course, the best way is to get inspired by what's already there. That might be other apps and services in your industry or something totally different. So for us, that basically meant before we got started with most of our like important campaigns in the beginning, which normally means you wanted people to sign up. So you did the onboarding, then you want to actually to send people straight through the conversion funnels. Of course, you want to do abandonment. Of course, you want to do like conversion rate lifters. So if you do that, you basically get certain ideas from different services and apps that you can include in that. And then for me, one of the like most important things early on was community. So there's a lot of communities out there, whether it's CRM, whether it's growth hacking, things like that and of that nature. Especially if you're working in a smaller team where there's not a lot of people around where you can bounce ideas off. It's just really great to have a community and to have people to actually ask about certain things, maybe learn from their mistakes that are a little more tailored to what you're trying to do than just generic advice that is thrown out there. So of course, there's many more, but for me personally, those were the most important in the beginning to actually get started. And you're going to see that once you actually do get started, you're going to certainly get more and more experience, and you're going to figure out like what works for your business and what doesn't. And you can basically then bend whatever you're trying to do into like that channel. So in the end, if you want to really like round up engagement from my perspective, generally speaking, like really focus on like building a positive and really enticing customer experience. So that basically means that once someone comes to your app, explain to users how to get started, like where can they actually find what they were looking for, which normally means that if they looked for a certain thing or clicked on a certain ad, they're expecting a certain content. So especially if you do have, again, deep linking, you do have like an onboarding in-app notification that lets them know, look, you look for this, you look for A, and here's A, now go buy it, for example. And in the end, it's really all about making it as easy as possible for them to get to where they actually want to go and help them along the way when problems may arise. And once you actually have people activated, you have them engaged, like it's of course your job to keep the retention high. That might be by offering personalized content and offers that are built on user segments. And I think that's something that Lorenzo already mentioned a little bit earlier, where I do think the more information that you have and the earlier you actually get started, that normally means you have more data than if you just start off fresh. And the more data you have, the more you're going to be able to create different segments and to actually talk and engage people with offers that are really more tailored to what they're trying to accomplish. So let's say you do have like 3 different products. Maybe there's some people who want to use all 3. Maybe there's some people who only use 1. So of course your onboarding and your re-engagement and everything like that should be tailored to every user segment individually. And I think that's really, really important here. So you might be asking yourself, like, yeah, engagement, I've been talking about it, CRM sounds all nice and well. What does it actually do? So we asked ourselves the same question. And for us, it's really, really important to measure everything. And I think you should probably do the same. So for us, we use certain types of control groups. So one is basically a certain control group where they don't actually get any of our engagement efforts, no campaigns whatsoever. And then of course we have like control groups on like a campaign level. And if you actually look at it over the past 3 years, when we compare our CRM users versus our control group that actually didn't get any CRM notifications whatsoever, we got an increase of 250% in lifetime value. I mean, if that doesn't really entice you, I don't know what will. So probably that for us is the best way to keep going with CRM. And if you actually follow along those lines, if you actually get going with this, you got your first campaign set up, you're learning along the way, you're figuring out like, here's some new ideas like I might try and I can try. And especially if you do have your first campaigns up and they're a success, probably you don't want to sit down and be like, well, that's a success, now on to another campaign, but there's always ways to improve and ways to optimize. So whether we're talking about different messages, different channels, or we're talking about like product A/B testing, offering new features or changing existing features, that's where optimization and A/B or multivariate testing for me comes into play. So we at MyPostcard really look at everything that we do in a constant beta state, which sounds neat. And in the end, just really means that at any given time, there's so many different tests going on to figure out where and how we can actually improve. So even some of the examples that I'm going to show you in a second here, they're always being tested. There's always new variants and new versions out there to figure out if there's something we're missing or something where we can even explain it even better to the people who are actually trying to accomplish something within our app. And in the end, I think that's where not only you, but you and your team and probably the whole company should really align on, is that growth should be at the center and always in focus, especially if you're at a smaller company and you really have to scale, you really have to grow, I think everybody needs to be on board and needs to agree on how important everything from analytics to attribution, CRM, and growth in the end is, to actually understand how to keep pushing in the same direction and keep pushing the company forward. So I'm going to show you two different examples because we don't have a lot of time. So forgive me for that. There's two different examples now. This one is, for example, in our onboarding. It's the first step in our onboarding journey, for example, and this is just the register wall. So in the beginning, where we didn't really know what we were doing, or we're just starting out, basically, we didn't have a register wall at all. So we did allow, and we allow to this day, guest checkouts, meaning people don't have to sign up or sign in. So we actually wanted to get more signups. So one of the ways that we tried it is the register wall. And the first version, which you can see on the left, actually already gave us an improvement of 107% when it comes to signups, which is already pretty fantastic. But we knew that we could actually do better, and there was different things we were trying out. So you can see in the center that that was like the best performing by far until this day, which actually gave us an increase of 215% in signups compared to not showing one at all. The issue with that, and I think that's where something I said earlier comes into play, is you need to know what you actually want to achieve. Because if you just focus on signups at this step, it might be like, oh my God, yes, that's the best conversion we've ever had. We're done here. The problem with this is that we actually saw 9% less purchases, because this is kind of a hard register wall, meaning some people thought that they actually couldn't close it, that they had to sign up, and they just weren't willing to do that. So people just stopped using the app, didn't purchase, and that in the end really cost us revenue. So in the end, we basically added a later button, made the create a free account button a little bit bigger, and added a byline to our share moments that matter with the people you love. And boom, we actually got down a little bit to still an increase of 195%, and that at the same conversion rate and with the same amount of purchases coming from those users. So in the end, I think the key takeaway here is like keep adapting and keep testing, but also make sure to not only look at just one metric, but really look at where might be the downside and how can we actually minimize it. The next example is really more twofold. It's basically two things I want to show you here. One is this is really more about product A/B testing and not as much about like campaign A/B testing, but also how simple it can be once there's actually something there for you to actually see an improvement. So one example that we have here is about our referrals, where we allow people to basically invite friends. Once they do that, they get €3, US dollars, or whatever currency you might want to have in your account. Basically, you get that for yourself and your friend. So on the left-hand side, you can see the old version that we were using, and on the right version, you can actually see the newer version that we were testing. And it's a little like spot the difference. On the first glance, there might not be a lot of things different. And actually, we only changed 3 things, and they were all just copy. So we changed the copy of the menu item, we changed the header, and we changed the button text. And in the end, the focus was just more going away from money and going away from invite friends to really, hey, there's something in it for you and your friends. So it's not just about you, but it's really just about you and your friends and everybody together. But if you actually click on the button, you know, hey, I'm going to get free credit. And that seemed to be working fine. And we actually got 25% more referrals just from that alone. So if I want to TLDR, just sum it up again, I think the most crucially important thing in the beginning when you get started is have a clear idea of what success actually looks like to you. Because in the end, whether it's engagement or then later on optimization, you just want to go for growth and you want to go for always better and improve everything. And so you need to know what you're looking for, because if you're going for the wrong KPIs, that can actually get you into trouble. If you start with best practices, but adapt early on to the needs that you actually have, and then continue to improve once you do actually have the analytics coming in, you're going to see that you're continuously going to be learning from that. And then you do have the growing experience that comes with actually testing things out. Falling on your face at sometimes, that's completely normal, especially in the beginning. But once you actually keep that mindset of keep at it, keep learning, and actually have everybody on board, I think that's like the best first step that you can do. So after you've done all of this, it's really, the question is like, where do you go from there? Like, what's the next thing to take care of, and how can you actually figure out where you want to take this next? And for me personally, I think there's certain questions that you have to ask yourself. One might be, where do you actually see the biggest opportunities in your company? The other one is, if you're actually thinking of those opportunities, how big of an impact do you actually think they might have once you actually realize them? And if you actually want to do that, how many resources do you think are needed to actually get there? And I think if you actually answer those, you can turn those into a compass. For example, by creating an impact effort matrix, which kind of looks like this. So for us, it was tremendously important since we're kind of a small team. We need to be really efficient, not only when it comes to attribution, but basically all the way through. So for us, of course, we try to focus on what's actually low effort but high impact, meaning where's things that most people are going to see, where it's actually going to have a very positive impact on our main KPIs. For example, the signups with our register wall, that was a quick win for us. The effort was fairly low and the impact was tremendous. Then of course there's major projects, something where you're going to have to put a lot of resources into it. But if the impact is high enough, it's definitely going to be worth it. You might not want to start with the major project, especially if you want to get the buy-in early on from everybody on C-level or something like that. You might want to go for the quick wins first. But as you move through it, as you actually get closer and closer to where you want to go, major projects definitely a way to go. Fill-ins then, low effort, low impact. It's really like you're not hurting yourself too much here. It's really more stylistically probably what you're trying to do here. Definitely stay away from time wasters. So especially for me personally, of course, there's going to be some time wasters which you aren't really able to tell upfront. There's sometimes going to be things which seem like low effort, but in the end turn out to be high effort. And maybe you overestimated the impact and it turns out it's not a quick win, but actually a time waster. It's really important to like always keep questioning yourself. Keep being honest with the analytics and keep being honest with the KPIs that you're tracking. And if it's just not the results that you're looking for, like feel free to stop projects if they're not working. So in the end, for us personally, and that's just talking about MyPostcard, we figured out early on the best way for us to actually scale while still keeping our customers engaged were these three main points, which is automation, localization, and personalization. Especially if you don't have a lot of people on your team, or if you actually do have the same repetitive journeys basically coming up, make sure to automate that early on. If you are in different markets, especially. I know that a lot of like American companies mostly worry about English, but especially for us, for example, we're available in 8 different languages and our CRM is working in 4 different languages. So we actually reach 95% of our users in their native language, giving us a better way to actually talk to people and engage with them on a level that they actually enjoy, instead of the app being, for example, in Italian, but only being spoken to in Spanish, for example, which doesn't really make sense. And last but certainly not least here is personalization. If you actually do have the data, and as Lorenzo mentioned earlier, if you actually start thinking about CRM and start tracking things early on, even before you get set up with all the different campaigns that you want to do, if you do have the data already on people that you can actually use and that actually makes sense, throw in personalization. So if you actually know what people are looking for and are buying, where they're from, what language they're speaking, what their names are, basically. Make sure to use that, because that's the 3 stages where we saw the best growth in the beginning, which is still kind of like generic, like major topics. But if once you actually get accustomed to that and keep them moving forward, I think you're going to be in a good way. And yeah, that's basically it from my part. I hope that gave you some more information on like the framework you might want to use to actually get started, where to get started if you actually don't know what the first steps might be. But also, yeah, feel free if you actually want to have more information. I know later on there's going to be also time for you to ask questions, but there's also going to be my email address, or feel free to connect on LinkedIn to talk a little bit more about something that might have been missing here in the talk. Yeah, thanks for listening.
All right, thanks a lot for this, Sebastian. This was super insightful. Yeah, okay, cool. So we're gonna go and have a fireside chat now to go and summarize everything that we talked about. I prepared a few questions here for you guys. The first question that I have for you is, what are the biggest CRM mistakes you either made yourself or observed at another app?
I'm just going to go first. I think from my side, I think it's really hard to actually judge what's going on at different other companies because you don't really know what they were going for. For us personally, I think one I already mentioned, like it's really hard to go for like, hey, let's do a quick win, but then it turns out to be a time waster. That was one of the biggest issues that we had in the beginning. I think it's really important to not focus too much on the short-term effect of campaigns, but really try to think long-term, because otherwise, especially if you want to scale and focus on automation, it's really going to screw you over. And for me personally, again, it's really, really important to get everybody on board. Like the whole team should probably be thinking about growth, or at least understand enough to know what you're going for, whether it's even, I don't know, for me personally, whether it's copywriting, whether it's graphics, whether it's C-level, everybody needs to know where you actually want to go and push into the same direction. And then when it comes to testing, as my last thing that I want to get out to this question is really make sure to test the right things. So not just look at one metric, but look at 2 or 3 metrics, especially the ones that might be negatively impacted, and don't trust inconclusive data. So if the statistical significance, for example, for an experiment is still too low, don't talk about the experiment, just keep waiting and keep digging into the results once they're actually there.
Yeah, hope you want to go, or should I go?
Yeah, no, actually, I'll be here because I'm very aligned with also what Sebastian said. It's all about being very integrated with also the other functions, to be aligned on the metrics that you want to use, the metrics you want to test, and the tests that you want to do. And also it's about being very strict in the kind of results you're going to accept. So statistical significance for sure, and makes really not much sense to talk about the tests until we have significant results.
In my opinion, I think, yeah, of course, I agree with Sebastian and Jacopo. And one of the biggest problems that I noticed in some of the companies I've worked and some of the companies I'm working right now with is the fact that we try to aim just at conversions. Like we need rides for the car sharing, just push the user to do the drive. We need purchases, push the user to do purchase. At the end, this really affects the retention rate because the user just opt out because they don't want to be told do this, do that, and do and buy this and buy that. Another mistake that I've seen is that when you don't have enough data, we tend to shorten the crowd. How do you say? Like, I don't know how to segment the data, so I will send a push notification to all the database. This is something that can give a quick win, as Sebastian and Jacopo said, but in the long run, it's not effective, and especially it doesn't help in terms of retention and LTV. So it really creates temporary advantages. The last part, I think this is something I experienced personally, is to have marketing and product work separately in the CRM implementation. I mean, we know that with CRM, we can do the onboarding, we can do product A/B testing, but also we send push notification and marketing emails. And sometimes these two activities are too disconnected. Sometimes we have totally different onboarding because the product team is taking care of it, and the marketing team is sending some promotions that are not related to the product activity. So my suggestion here is, since the beginning, work together, product and marketing team, so that the product team will understand the needs of the marketing team and vice versa. So we really need to be aligned. As Sebastian was saying, everyone needs to be on board.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I do see that a lot at quite a few companies. I think also the bigger they get, usually it's really hard to really work closely together with CRM and product. And I think that's one of the main challenges that we're actually also trying to tackle with Leanplum, as we are having a product part and a CRM part that actually works best if used together. So that actually is a quite interesting shift that you can also observe when actually people start using Leanplum and both departments start working together, stripped loose from developers needed there. So yeah, that's a very interesting observation. And yeah, I think the significance, the statistical significance, I think people generally often underestimate how significant things really need to be to go further, because it is the extra effort you have to make, right? The test maybe didn't give you the result that you need, and then you do have to go and spend more time on it. So it's the easy choice to go and run with an intuition or with a direction. So yeah, I think those 2 points are super, super crucial. Thanks for that.
Just maybe one thing to add to what you just said. I think it's also important that maybe if your results in the end show like no improvement at all, maybe it makes sense to really look into the different segments. Like we had campaigns where the effect was zero. But if you actually dig into it just by platform, for example, you'd see that maybe it didn't really work at all on Android, but it did super well on iOS. So really, you have to dig into your data and really segment to find out what you're actually looking for. And don't overgeneralize specifically in that case.
Yeah, good add one. Thanks. Okay, question number 2 for you guys. What is your experience if I implement everything I learned here today? When will I be able to notice measurable ROI? So if I'm now saying, okay, guys, I made a list. I'm working on everything that you told me here today, and I'm going to start with it tomorrow. So what is your, how quickly does that translate into ROI in your opinion?
Should I go first?
Yeah.
Don't want to take anything away, but for me personally, I mean, ideally, you wouldn't just start tomorrow. Ideally, you would start right after this webinar, of course. But if we're talking about it, I think it's really hard to say, because depending on which industry you're in, it varies a lot. But in the end, from my experience, I would really start with, what do you think really has the highest impact, especially highest impact, low effort. Get those early quick wins, because that actually gets you the buy-in, especially if your whole team might not be on board. And if there's some people, especially in C-level, who don't really know whether to spend money on CRM and spend resources, that's really going to show them. Because if you show someone, like if you actually get started with campaigns, for example, that get people, like more people to sign up, more people to convert, more people to actually cross or upsell, if there's revenue in it, no one in the C-level especially is going to say no to something. So I think that for me was really important early on, like go to where the money is basically and try to optimize there first, especially if there's a lot of people. Because if there's more people, let's say you want to do a test or you want to do a campaign right at the beginning where everybody is still on board, you can send it to like hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. If you actually go to a place where maybe it's very, very specific, a real tiny user segment, you're only testing it on 10,000 people, and it's going to take way longer to see an effect. So that's why I'd probably say go where a lot of people are and go where probably the revenue is going to be improved, because that's how you actually get the early wins early on.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah, I would also say it really depends on the industry you're in, and also on your monetization and the way your whole business model is built. Of course, you know, if you have a subscription model, it's may take longer depending on which kind of touch point you decide to focus on. Focus early in, let's say, the acquisition or retention channel, maybe you see results earlier, and that could also have the higher impact. But maybe you want to focus on your core users and see what effect it has on them, so that may come later. While if you have a business model that is not based on a subscription, you could see it even earlier, depending on what re-engagement you are building. So it's really hard to say, but I also agree with Sebastian saying, and that you should try to test on the biggest user base that you have in order to see results sooner.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question, like Lisa. It's because really it could be easy to go to your CEO and say, I can see ROI results tomorrow. And it's true. I mean, at the end, it's kind of a direct response tool, CRM, because I send a push notification, I can see a purchase or a subscription, as you were saying. This, in my opinion, is very dangerous for the organizations in general. I mean, it's a problem of mentality. Until companies will think that we need to check immediate results, we will have this problem. In my opinion, it's better to wait and see what kind of incremental ROI the CRM activities will bring. Like how many people that are retained then in the future will generate revenue, not the direct effect of the campaigns, but the effect of the user retained. Unfortunately, we need to educate more the companies at this, and that's what we are trying to do at Replug. The problem at the same time that with more and more startups we are working, there are more and more investors that they want to see immediate results, and therefore the goals are switching to the short term instead of the long term. That's my opinion. So I hope that it will change, and I think it will, because I mean at the end it's like as it was for user acquisition 5-6 years ago, it was only app installs. Now it's app installs plus retention. I think that soon it will be retention in the long term and not in the short term.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Lorenzo. Makes sense. Yeah. So question number 3. Do CRM strategies need to be adjusted due to COVID-19? What would be important to pay attention to during uncertain times? So the question here really is targeted at like, hey, we have a successful CRM strategy and we've been making tweaks now and then, but is there something fundamentally different that we should be looking at right now? Is there specific metrics we should keep an eye on? Are there maybe best practices that you have seen that work really well these days? What is your experience?
Should I start now, since I was always the last?
Yes, go ahead, Lorenzo.
I mean, I'd be quick. Like, yeah, I believe that CRM strategies need to adapt to, of course, this particular situation. In general, we have seen that in an holistic way, let's say an holistic view, all the communication adapted to the COVID, right? So I see, in my opinion, I see more attention to the quality of the message, because anyways, people are at home and they are a bit frustrated, they're a bit worried. So of course, change a bit the tone of communication is important. Then again, it depends really on the type of product that you have. If you have a delivery service, now it's the time, food delivery, drink delivery, now it's the time really to play hard. And you need to beat your competition, you need to be there in the right moment. If you have if you had a transportation service in the time of the lockdown, for example, in Italy, everyone was at home. It was difficult to say something to the users like, what can you say? I hope you are good. It can be a strategy, it cannot. So it was and it still is a very interesting time, and I guess that we will be able to analyze it later on when it will be over soon, hopefully.
Yeah, I think it's critical to understand if your users are starting to engage with your product in a different way than they were before, because now many are getting used to do some activities online or with digital services that before they were doing with offline services. I think it's very important to understand if there's a new user base that you are acquiring that is coming in, and if there is, what are their expectations, what can you do to engage them and to meet those different expectations that may be different from the audience that you were used to have in pre-COVID times.
Yeah, I think from my side, and again, now it's probably my turn to just say I completely agree with Lorenzo and Jacopo on what they already said. Quick disclaimer also, I also do think when it comes to this, it pretty much depends on which industry or field you're basically in. As Lorenzo already said, even just food delivery versus like games, for example, even games going strong. For us, for example, MyPostcard, a lot of people sending out cards to people to stay in touch with loved ones. So we didn't really have too many effects at times, but I know a lot of other people did have like very, very dire consequences to this. So I think from like a business perspective, probably focus on efficiency. So only really go for something that you know is probably going to be working, and cut out all the fillers or things that you think are going to be like risky tests at this time. But overall, like in general, I think especially in a situation like this, like I think it's pretty simple. Show compassion. I think if you don't really have to say, like have something to say that actually is about what's going on and how to actually help people, probably don't say anything. I think now's not really the right time to sell something, but now is really like think long-term. And I think the more actually, the further we go into the future, I think it's already been going on in the last couple of years, like mouth to mouth becomes so really, really important. And it's just such a great way to actually get more people involved. And that's something that's one, maybe a little hard to measure. Now, on the other hand, maybe not, like there's not so many tools you have at your hand to actually get people involved on that side. And I think how you act during something like COVID-19, I think pretty much says a lot about like, what do you actually care about as a company, and what do you care about in your campaigns?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a very good one. Show compassion and play it safe for now. I think those are two very key points for sure. Thanks, guys. Yeah, and the last question for today is, if you could give the audience only one piece of advice, what would it be? So your final piece of advice is sending everybody off into a sunny afternoon. What is it? What should they not forget?
I think it was clear from my slides. My advice is really to measure what you're doing and to only try initiatives that you know how to measure. Let's say that when trying to prioritize activities, I think that the potential should go hand in hand with the measurability of the project. If you think something has very great potential, but there's no way to understand whether this potential is due to that or to some other unforeseen events or exogenous events, then you shouldn't do it.
I think my final suggestion was also clear from my slides, like don't wait until it's too late. That's my great piece of advice, I believe. I mean, I won't repeat myself, but you could find, I think there was a question that I answered in the Q&A chat. And I found myself in a situation where we started too late with CRM, and we found difficult the implementation because, of course, there were already some tools that were working and collecting data for many years. And then because there were discrepancies, and most importantly, these tools, they were not communicating. Because at the beginning, we didn't think we needed, I mean, we knew we needed CRM, but we didn't think about moving in the direction and doing things for having an easier implementation. And if you don't have a good implementation, at the end, you won't be able to do the things that Sebastian was mentioning, that are automation, segmentation, and localization, that are crucial to have an effective CRM strategy. So again, if you want to go back through the slides and see when it's time to start, because the right time to start is day minus one.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
I honestly think for me, the best advice I can give is go get yourself some ice cream. With the weather like that, I definitely want to go for some. No, but seriously, I honestly think it's easier for me to actually go third here because I probably had 3 or 4 different things I wanted to say, and you guys already said 2 of them. So I think for me, I probably then want to end it on always be testing, like as a really easy mantra to take away from this. If you actually do get started as early as you can, if you can yesterday, if not, probably start today. That's what basically Lorenzo said, Jacobo, with like measure everything and make sure that you have all that on board. And then from my side, probably if you have that set up already, you're on a good track. Keep testing, keep at it, work on it, and always make sure that you test the things that you're trying to do to actually grow.
Cool. Yeah, it makes total sense. Keep testing. I heard that a lot today. It will be stuck in my brain, and I think after everybody got their ice cream, they will probably go back to go and set up some new campaigns and run some tests.
I mean, hopefully it works in a sense so that every time you actually have some ice cream, you think of how can actually grow and how can actually test some new things. So that's good.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, so for the audience here today, still, I have one final poll for you guys, and that is, I want to know what you thought of this session. So you're having a poll coming up in your screen right now. There's a few questions which I would like to hear about to really learn what you thought of the session today. So can everybody see the poll?
See, but I cannot vote.
Yes. All right. So the first question is this the first Leanplum Roundtable session you attended? Second one is, how did you like the content presented, rated on a scale of 1 to 10? The third question is, was the content presented new to you? So did you know most of it today already, or were things brand new? Was the session too long or too short? And what overall grade would you give this session, as well as would you recommend this session to others? All right. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm just going to cut it short here. We have some good answers already. All right, let's move on. Thank you very much. Okay, now we have a few questions here for the audience Q&A here today. I'm just going to go to the next slide. So in any case, for anybody that has more questions aside of those, feel free to send an email to either me or one of the panelists here today. We'll be happy to go and have a conversation about whatever subject it is that you would like to learn more about. And now we're going to go and start with the Q&A. The first question I have here for the panelists is, how important is calculating LTV before you test your audience personas?
I'm just going to go first on that one. I think like my relationship with LTV is really, I don't know how to really describe it. It's not too good probably. I don't really trust it too much, especially if you're just starting out. Like LTV is so hard to actually calculate to a point where it does make sense or it actually is worth to give a damn about. So in the beginning, I think there's more important things to actually worry about. Like if you're a company and you already do have a lot of data in your background, maybe for years even, and you do have a good sense for what your LTV is, I think it might make sense to really go that route and to really go into, okay, how many different personas do I have? How many different segments? And how, like, what is the LTV for all those different ones? And how can I actually work on improving it? What effect might it have if I test different things on them? But in the beginning, I do think, don't rely, like from my perspective at least, don't rely too much on what you think it might do to the LTV. Just really make sure to like, what are these user segments? Make sure that you actually divided it up nicely in a way that actually makes sense. And then create campaigns for those audiences so that it's really more about the engagement. It's really more about the KPIs that you're looking for. And then after some time has passed, you can actually go back and look at what did it actually do to the LTV, because I think it's really more of a long-term goal that you might want to go for here instead of just calculating LTV or checking LTV on a short term. I don't think that makes a lot of sense, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks a lot. I hope this answered the question of Johanna. If you have any more questions, feel free to go and shoot an email to Sebastian or any of the other panelists. Thank you. We have another question for you guys. Do you believe in automated ad acquisition, engaging automation in paid ads to bring more installs and quality users? If yes, what are the best tools in automated ad serving?
Well, I can start with that, like, since we're starting again from the acquisition, and I do believe in automation until a certain point. So just to be clear, we hear about automation since years, like computers will replace humans. That's not happened yet, and that's good for all of us because we still have our jobs. And I think that this will never happen. Now, I knock on the wood, but still, we should be able to keep our jobs. We just need to cooperate with the automation systems. An example, let's suppose a travel company needs to target the audience with very specific messages. Like we can promote travels from New York to Los Angeles or from Paris to London and whatsoever. So imagine the channel manager of Facebook doing all the different ads with different places with different prices, because of course a travel company will have different prices and discounts. It's impossible to do that. So if you have a good automation system that gives the users in the right place with the right offer, and also based on the behavior of the users, like you can know where these users travel most more likely and whatsoever. So if you can do that, it's really helpful. But I wouldn't go outside and search for one of these tools. I would build something internally if you have the opportunity. Otherwise, there is already some good automation level in the advertising platform like Facebook or like Google. So they offer some automating rules that can help reducing the work of the channel manager and give more space to creativity. That's for the acquisition part. For the engaging part, I leave it to Jacopo and Sebastian.
Did you still want to add
say
something?
about
I mean, for now, I think I'll leave it to Sebastian.
I think I'm not really sure if I actually understand that correctly when it comes to automated ad acquisition and basically the turns into engaged automation and paid ads. From my side, ad acquisition for us, we mostly rely on automated acquisition and universal app install campaigns and stuff like that. For us, it's really more about even people who are not that highly engaged or who are not that where the acquisition actually isn't as efficient as we'd like it to be. There's still ways to engage those users as well. I just think it's different than, there's no one size fits all here as well. So if you actually throw everything into one pool and try to solve that, that's going to be really hard to do. Because I think in general, we're not talking about rocket science. It's just simple steps, but there's a lot of them. So it's not simple, but it's easy probably. So in the end, I'd really look more into whether it's automated acquisition, whether it's things that you're doing at so many different levels. In the end, really figure out who are you talking to and what are those people actually interested in. Because if you actually talk to them about what they are interested in, because even if they clicked on an ad from a source where you don't think that the lifetime value is going to be great for that channel, there's still something that they're looking for. And if you can actually talk to them about that and make it as easy as possible for them to actually get there, it's still going to work out fine. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Yeah, I hope that answers the question, Victoria. Feel free to shoot an email if not. Thanks. All right, the last question for the day, guys. What are the best practices to optimize journey CRM? What are common mistakes in CRM journey optimization?
I mean, I can go first since I was talking about it earlier. I'm actually gonna let's talk about an example to make it a little easier. I think one of the main journey CRMs you should probably get started with early on is especially for iOS, is the push opt-in. So if you actually want to have people opt into push, you probably just don't want to show the generic iOS opt-in that they give you, but you want to do a pre-pop-up where basically you have in control if people actually are interested to get push notification early on. Let's say you do that once people open the app, you have it, they can decide yes or no. If they do say yes, show the pop-up by iOS and hopefully they sign up. If they say no, hold it back to, for example, they made their first purchase, they showed some interest. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you here is that if you're talking about journeys, it's basically have one journey for one specific goal. I think that already ties in one of the most common mistakes that I'm seeing, one journey for 13 different goals. That's not going to work. That's really, really hard to do. And I wouldn't really advise it, because what you're ideally trying to do here is you want to get from point A to point B. So what is your goal and how do you actually achieve it? But instead of just sending one campaign, send out 13, but just to the people who actually want to see it. So in that case that I was just talking about, if you ask someone, do you want to get pushes? And they say, yes, you're already done. They should be out of that journey. It's already they achieved the goal. But there's so many different ways for all the people who said no in the beginning to actually get them interested. Maybe your generic text in the beginning of why it might be interesting for you to get push notification doesn't really work. But maybe after they made their first purchase, they want to actually get more information about when is it actually going to be sent out, what's actually going to be happening to my order. Then maybe use that as another way for, hey, if you actually want to have more information, get the push notifications opt-in. And maybe even then people are like, nah, I'm still not interested. But maybe there's another feature. Maybe they want to know when some of their friends signed up. Hey, that's another way for you to actually get the opt-in. So basically it's just journeys as I define it. It's just, you know where to go, you know what your goal is, and then you're trying to figure out as many ways as possible to get people to buy in, but on their own terms. So you want to basically just be creative and figure out what's the different ways that I can find to give more value to the users so that they actually get to the goal that I wanted to do in the end, basically. And the common mistakes, again, trying to solve too many problems at once. And also the CRM journeys should still be kind of simple. So make it all about the user and make it easy for people to understand what's actually going on, and don't overdo it. Like normally, especially if I open up a new app and within 5 minutes I already have 4 emails in my inbox, that's probably not a great for the first impression. So space it out a little bit and really like get your priorities in check. If you know that the most important thing for you is for people to sign up, and once they maybe are signed up and they're out of that journey, maybe then it's time to go for the first conversion or go for inviting friends or whatever you might want to go for. So make sure that there's like a logical first step and next steps following that, instead of throwing it at them all at once, because that rarely works, and for us didn't. So I wouldn't really advise to do it.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah, maybe taking inspiration from Sebastian, I think one very important thing is to treat your users like adults, let's say, and telling them, for instance, why you're asking for notifications, and not just spamming them, asking for a notification, hoping that some will click on it, but really just trying to empathize with them and trying to treat them, understanding what's their objective, what they want to have with the app, and treat them with respect. So as also Sebastian was saying, spamming them with 5 emails within 10 minutes is probably not a big sign of respect in terms of their time and of their attention.
Yeah,
I'm going to jump back right in real quick. I think that's a really, really important point, because I mean, if we're actually honest, you can trick someone. You can trick someone once, and it's pretty easy in the short term to get results, but in the long term, you're gonna be done for. So that's really when you actually respect your users and you actually talk to them like they're adults, and you actually get them the information that they need. In the long term, they're gonna pay you back, literally. So that's really the way that you want to go, instead of just pushing your agenda and trying at all costs to actually get to the KPIs that you need. Just really be strategic about it.
Lorenzo, I think you also wanted to go and add something.
I have almost nothing to add. I mean, the only thing I can say is that with the journey, actually with the actual functionality of journey, you have the opportunity to control all your different mediums of communication. Like, as we know with CRM, you can communicate with push notification, you can communicate with in-app messages, and with email. Sometimes it happens that you receive a discount of 10% via push notification and one of 25% via email. And that's something that with the journey functionality, you can really avoid. I mean, you want to be consistent. You want to be, you want to be trusted. And if I send a consistent communication, if you don't open the email, I will send you a push notification, and vice versa. So all these kind of things can really help, as Sebastian and Jacopo said, to create trust and create a long-term relationship. So that's what CRM is about, creating a long-time relationship.
Yeah, cool, nice. I hope that answered your question, Yelena. As I said earlier, in case it didn't, shoot an email. We'll be happy to go and answer your question further. All right, so this brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you, everybody, very much for sitting in on this one, on this super warm and hot day. I hope you're gonna enjoy a nice afternoon and take some time to process everything you learned here today. You will receive the slides and the recording tomorrow. So if you wanna go and flick through and maybe deepen some of the knowledge, or maybe you would like to share the recording with your teammates, with your colleagues that you would like this knowledge to also have, feel free to do so. You will receive it tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much also to our panelists here today, Sebastian, Jacopo, Lorenzo. It was a pleasure having you here today. I, for myself, learned a lot, while I actually should be already fairly knowledgeable. So I know a lot more now, which is great. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this brings us to the
everyone.
end.
Thank you guys. I think I'll go and get an ice cream now.
Yes, we should all do that. We deserve it. Thank you very much. Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
guys.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.